Welcome to Organic Wine Review. I'm your host, Winston Jones, and we are here with Mr. Edward Wallo from Yorkville Cellars. Welcome.
Thanks for having me today.
We are happy to have you. So Yorkville Cellars is in Mendocino, and you concentrate kind of primarily on the Bordeaux varietals, is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, we believe that we are the only vineyard in the world that grow all 6 of the noble red grapes originally from Bordeaux and make each one of them into a wine. In the late 80s, when my wife, Deborah, and co-partner founded Yorkville Cellars, we kind of zigged while everybody else was zagging. They were doing Cabernet, of course, was the main red, Chardonnay was the main white, and Zinfandel was kind of on the outskirts, but you really couldn't buy very many Merlots, and of course you couldn't taste a Malbec. They weren't being imported from Argentina. Petit Verdot was just unheard of and not planted here in California. But having spent quite a bit of time in Bordeaux, we decided to plant all 6 of the red noble grapes, so-called noble red grapes of Bordeaux. So we have Malbec, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere, and Merlot, all in our front vineyard. It's called Rennie Vineyard. Rennie's my mother's maiden name. And they grow side by side in the same conditions, the same trellis and whatnot, same viticultural practices. So we had the idea of doing more or less what the French do, which is blend these into their Chateau Red, their production, their one red wine. But after 7 years, we plant it, and then you plant it, then it's 4 years till you get a commercial crop. Then 2 years in the barrel, we finally got to taste all of these for the first time. And we did a complete 180-degree change and decided to make each one of them into a wine, plus a blend, which we ended up calling Richard the Lionheart.
Yeah, so what about Mendocino kind of equates to Bordeaux? Is there a climate similarity or soil? Or
well, each of the 3 main North Coast counties, Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, have so-called Region 1s, the cooler climate areas, Region 2s, sort of mid, and Region 3s. And one is Burgundy-like, and in our case we are adjacent to the Anderson Valley, which is a Region 1, but we're more inland. We're up at 1,000 to 1,300 feet, so we're 30% hotter than them, and in fact we're a low Region 3. We're virtually the same heat summation as Bordeaux, and parts of inland Mendocino are 3. We abut the Alexander Valley on the other side, and of course they're known for their cabs there, so they're much like we are, although they're down in a valley and we're a separate appellation because we're up in the hills.
Oh, so is Yorkville its own AVA now?
It's been its own AVA for about 10 years now.
Wow.
Yorkville Highlands, its name.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Wow. So I'm very interested in the fact that Malbec and Carmenere, you don't see that in California a whole lot. At least I haven't experienced a lot. Is that difficult to grow, or I mean, how do you figure out that?
Both of those grapes have their difficulties, and therefore they've kind of been severely reduced in Bordeaux. Carmenere is a very late ripener, and a farmer probably wouldn't want to mess with it. As a winery who sells their grapes to the wineries and tries to make money for the put food on the table, for a winery like ourselves, we're willing to put up with the grief of growing Carmenere. Malbec does what's called a flip-flop, where you have a decent year, like if you're getting 4 tons an acre, you get your 4 tons, but it doesn't have the energy to do that 2 years in a row, so the second year you might only get 2.5 tons. So again, a farmer would probably be negative about that, because a Merlot, for example, is a consistent producer. If you get 4 tons an acre, you'll likely get 4 tons an acre every year, and you're kind of ensuring your family's future that way. So because of those kind of things, Bordeaux is shifted more towards the main 4 and less, or 3 really, and less of the Malbec, Carmenere, and Petit Verdot. Even though over hundreds and hundreds of years, those were the 6 main varietals.
Wow. So I guess through experience, they just kind of slowly weeded it out, weather related or ripening.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. So this Richard the Lionheart blends all 6 of the Bordeaux varietals.
Yes,
right?
it's the only one that I know of that does have all 6. King 5 made a big splash when they came out that they had the so-called 5 red Bordeaux grapes, but kind of ignoring there was no Carmenere being grown in California at the time, so they hustled around to a number of vineyards to come up with those 5. It then was increased the interest and the knowledge about Bordeaux varietals when Saint-Cepage became Wine of the Year in the early 2000s and got a lot of press and discussion. Of course, there was the competition to come up with the word meritage to use to describe Bordeaux blends made in California. All this happened well after we planted all of these. And we are very happy that we did and very much enjoy making all these. So the Richard is a blend of all 6, and it's the most fun we have every year making it.
Yeah, I can imagine the blending process. To me, that would be a hard process to go through. How do you know how much cap to put in, how much Merlot? I'm sure it's too in-depth to go through here.
It's so hard that it's somebody's got to do it. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of days. We do it in the mornings while your palate is fresh, you're dealing with unfined, unfiltered wine. We take our best lots, our best barrels, and we're small enough, we make a dozen different wines. We make between 500 and 1,000 cases of each, so it's virtually hands-on. These are handcrafted wines, and we can go ultimately barrel by barrel putting together the blend.
All right. Yeah, the one thing I can say about Mendocino is that I'm really starting to enjoy Mendocino County. The fruit has a purity that I don't find in other regions, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the organics, but we can talk about that a little bit later. So let's go ahead and drink some of this Richard. So who is Richard the Lionheart?
Richard the Lionheart was Eleanor of Aquitaine's son, and Eleanor in roughly the year 1200 had her marriage annulled and went from being Queen of France, and she married Henry, who became Henry II of England, went to become Queen of England. So when she moved up, she wanted to serve the wines that she'd grown up with in the royal courts there, and in fact she inherited from her father all of the Bordeaux area. So Eleanor arguably was the first person to export wine to another country, and her favorite son was Richard. So we named our white blend of Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc Eleanor after her. And Richard basically spent his life, he's known for being on a few crusades, but he lived in Saint-Emilion, spoke French, didn't really speak English, although he was King of England. And my wife, being English, loved the idea that they owned this big chunk of France for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And he, when we looked into it a little deeper, actually loved wine and formed a group to decide whether the wine was good enough quality to be considered or called Saint-Emilion. And so kind of the first level of appellation control A.
All right.
And so we blended this over many days, and it's a blend of all 6. And we're drinking the 1996 Richard the Lionheart.
Yeah, the nose on this is really incredible. Nice dark fruits, currants, but on the palate it's so smooth already. Like, really don't have to age it. It's ready to drink. I'm sure with a little bit of age.
It does age. We've been doing it now for this is our 11th vintage, 12th vintage, and I would say that what you learn by growing all of these and putting them together is how each one lends to the blend, what each one contributes. Cabernet Franc is mainly aromatics, the Malbec and the Merlot are more mid-palate, the Petit Verdot and the Carmenere are some structure and tannin, and of course the Cab is what hangs most of it all together very effectively. And in this case, we strictly do it hedonistically. What's the best wine we can make? It's not like we have a house style that we try to make it the same each year. It's what did Mother Nature give us, and what's the best wine we can make out of it to let the vineyard speak for itself.
Right. I love that philosophy. Richard the Lionheart, great wine, nice food wine, just a beautiful bouquet. So thank you for coming to Organic Wine Review. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.